Okay. All right. So Veronica Tan, is she around? So we got Veronica. So that again, two people with related questions: Veronica and Tony Correia-Sampaio. Tony. Okay. So we'll start with you, and then we'll move to you, and then Andrew can answer both. So Veronica, MBA 2018.
Yes. Well, first of all, Mr. Gould, I'll just like to thank you for your valuable insight so far. And my question to you is, what do you think the future of oil and gas looks like with the advances the renewable energy industry is making in terms of both technology and cost?
Okay, and then Tony is a Sloan 2016, yes?
Yes.
All right.
So my question it's about what are the changes you see on the business model of oil and gas companies in the coming years vis-a-vis the world economy, changes in the energy mix of the world, and improvements in energy efficiency?
Yeah, so if you will accept what I said a bit earlier, that, contrary to what people generally imagine, demand is not yet stagnating. In fact, 2014 it increased by 1.6 million barrels a day, 2015 1.5 million barrels a day, 2016 1.3 million barrels a day. And the norm on which all the agencies used to plan was 0.09. So what it tells you is that low prices can still encourage demand. The advent of renewables, even with lower cost and lower technology, is not a question of whether or not they work. They do work. The question is the oil and gas infrastructure worldwide, from wellhead to consumer, is by far the biggest infrastructure of any industry anywhere. And to replace that infrastructure is going to take, even with some more technology changes, I used to say 50 years, I'll say 30 years now, 30 years minimum. And, while, yes, there are huge advantages in the technology of renewables and the cost of renewables, the infrastructure you need to manage renewables is completely different from the infrastructure you need to manage the existing sources of energy. And, one of the biggest issues you keep reading about is the grid. If you have renewables, the grid has to work, the electricity distribution grid has to work in a totally different way from the way that we traditionally did it. And the other aspect of renewables, be they solar or wind, and this is probably, there is one technology that could accelerate the use of those sources of energy much faster than others, and that would be reliable, large-scale battery storage. And you do see more and more R&D into battery storage. We have Mr. Elon Musk, who is going to solve all the world's problems if he's not too busy on Mars, But the fact is that there has not yet been a breakthrough in battery storage technology that allows you to manage, be it solar or wind, in a sensible manner. And today it's not sensible. So you have days in Germany when they give away electricity because they have so much wind they can't store it, they don't know what to do with it. The same thing in Texas. In Texas, if you agree to use your appliances at night when the wind's blowing, you can have free electricity, But that's not a long-term solution. And solar is a bit the same. So I think that I don't think there's any doubt that renewables will come. I don't think there's any doubt that they will take an increased share of the energy mix. But the implementation of a system and the implementation of an infrastructure to make renewables a principal part of the energy equation is going to take much longer than people think. Because, it's a bit like mobile telephones. There are countries where the mobile telephone totally bypassed the need for a fixed line system. So Bangkok is a city where basically they never had a fixed line system that worked. They went straight to mobiles. The sensible thing to do with renewables is to go to distributed power generation. And you do see that in parts of Africa, for example, where There's this very entrepreneurial company in Africa which basically charges people to recharge their mobile phones by having a small solar pack in each village. Things like that. But those are actually a much more efficient use of renewables today than trying to replicate what the developed economies have done with their electricity distribution system. So that leads me back to your question, because there's a fundamental question that the oil and gas industry has to face, and it's not faced it, and it's getting to the point where it's becoming really necessary to face it. So the fact is that the oil and gas industry has finally, even ExxonMobil, admitted that climate change is an issue. And they have basically two choices. One is to be like the tobacco industry and to say, okay, we know it causes cancer, we know that smoking's bad for you, but look at the cash flow, you know? And that's exactly what the tobacco industry has done. It's not very nice, but it's what they've done. And the other solution is to say, okay, we want to be part of the solution. And you are seeing moves by the major oil companies, and you're going to see more in the short-term future, of the oil companies recognizing that these are real problems that they have to solve. So, you know, the two that impressed me so far is firstly a consortium of oil companies, NOCs and IOCs and some independents, who are really investing to solve the problem of methane emissions, you know, because methane emissions are much worse than CO2. And the second is Total. Well, you know, Total, rightly or wrongly, have gone into photovoltaics. I mean, Patrick tells me he loses a fortune on them, but he's in there. And they spent $1 billion on a battery company. So they're actually beginning to take baby steps towards the fact that one day they're not going to be an oil and gas company. But they're quite openly saying, these are baby steps, but we understand we have to be in that space, and we want to be part of the solution and not remain part of the problem. And I think you're going to see that shortly from a couple other of the super majors, where they will make major statements about what their policy actually is towards climate change and how they intend to be involved as part of the solution. While at the same time, because it's still the world's principal source of energy, they're not going to give up on oil and gas, or fossil fuels.